What's up, everyone? This is Kazak back again with my first impressions on Metaphor Refantazio. So, I've been keeping my eye on this game for quite a while, as I'm sure most other Atlas fans are, because of its unique fantasy aesthetic and interesting character designs. For those who don't know, this was originally a project that was teased years ago with concept art that was called Ray Fantasy. But Atlas didn't really give any more information about this project, and for a long while, some fans just assumed that it was either cancelled or stuck in development hell. However, it wasn't until last year when we finally saw this project become the game that we all now know today. So, now that I gave a little bit of context behind the game itself, is this title actually worth trying out, or is it just some boring Persona clone like some claim it to be? Well, after pouring in a good amount of playtime into the prologue demo, I can confidently say that this game has the potential to be one of the best JRPGs in 2024. However, before I do talk about the game in depth, I want to give a small disclaimer that this video will contain light spoilers about the story. So if you haven't played the prologue demo, then I highly suggest that you play it first, unless you don't really care, then just keep on watching the video in that case. The story starts off with our main protagonist and his fairy companion Gallica, who are both on a certain mission that we don't really learn about until a little later. After a run-in with some bandits and escaping through the monster-infested desert, the two of them manages to reach the royal capital, Grand Trad. From here, our protagonist joins the military, then encounters Stroll, who's a kind-hearted noble that becomes friendly with our protagonist. Once they get assigned to their first mission, a soldier reports that a human has gone on a rampage, murdering soldiers who come across it. The team make their way through this castle, witnessing all the corpses of their fellow comrades. Eventually, they reach to the top of the castle where they come across this ugly, horrifying abomination that makes quick work of both the protagonist and Stroll. When it looks like all hope is lost, our protagonist unlocks the power of the archetype and takes down the human. This is where we come across a new character named Grius, who's one of your allies for this secret mission. He explains that 12 years ago, there was an attempted assassination on the Prince of Ukrainia's life, and while he did survive, he was afflicted with a curse that if they can't break it, he'll eventually succumb to the curse and die. While they couldn't find the identity of the people responsible, Grius suspects that Louise, the talented and charismatic Archmage, has some involvement in not only the prince's assassination, but also the death of the king as well. You're probably wondering how does any of this connect to the main hero in question. Well, he's actually friends with the prince and wants to help break his curse. However, the only way to break it is to kill Louise. After hearing all this backstory, Stroll decides that he wants to help out our mission, and the team set their sights on returning to Grand Trad to attend to the royal funeral and assassinate Louise. Now, there's a lot more to the story that happens here, but I'd rather that you guys play the prologue demo to see what happens next, because this story gets really interesting with its world building and events that kept me invested into the narrative so far. The game also puts a major emphasis on the concept of fantasy. For example, the main character has this novel where if you look at the imagery, it basically depicts our modern world with cars, large buildings, streetlights, and a crowded space filled with people. I find this intriguing because usually we don't typically see what these fantasy stories will see as fiction in their eyes to this extent. It makes me wonder what their angle is going to be in the full release. Maybe it'll be like some sort of meta commentary on how we look at fantasy as a concept and use it as a source of inspiration to create real changes to our reality. Or maybe I'm just spewing absolute nonsense, I don't know. I'll leave that up to you guys to decide that. However, Metaphor isn't afraid to touch upon darker subject material like discrimination, overcoming grief, and political corruption. Even the main character is looked down upon by the people and is openly degraded. The game isn't afraid to show how corrupted the people in power are, but even demonstrates the regular people's own malice and lack of compassion for others. While this type of storytelling isn't necessarily new, the way that Metaphor shows this is gripping, and it motivates you, the player, to want to watch our heroes' journey. As I mentioned before, the game has a lot of substance to its narrative and world that I could keep going, but I think it's time to shift our focus to the gameplay, because this, in my opinion, is where the game also really shines. At a quick glance, people will obviously point out how similar a lot of Metaphor's mechanics is to the Persona series. It uses similar sound effects, there's a calendar system, social links, characters use their own form of this world's personas, and hell, even Jack Frost just pops up out of nowhere. Although, to be fair, he's basically in almost everything Atlas related. It doesn't surprise me that people would see this as a fantasy Persona. And while this game definitely has the bones of that series, I think that dumbing it down to only being a quote unquote fantasy Persona sort of feels somewhat degrading to the game. Don't get me wrong, the comparison is undeniably valid, and some people may feel a little disappointed because it was built up to be like this entirely new experience separate from Persona, but yet it carries a lot of its DNA. However, I don't think it should be a deterrent from people trying out the game and seeing what it offers, especially since I think it does enough to separate itself from just being a carbon copy. As an example, let's talk about the combat. On the surface level, you have your standard attacks and archetypes to exploit weaknesses. However, there's some important factors to the combat. First, on the field, you can freely run around and attack enemies to lower their guard to get the upper hand on them, or surprise attack them and instantly break their guard. Once you're in battle, you'll notice there's a front and back system, where if you send one of the characters to the front, they deal more damage, but take more damage as a result. However, if you send a character to the back position, their attack is lowered, but increases their defense in exchange. This creates interesting situations and strategies where you have to decide when to prioritize heavy defense, or to back off and focus on support, or a mixture of both. Essentially, you have to be very mindful of when to switch around positions, otherwise you're going to get completely destroyed. Archetypes also work a little differently, where you switch between different archetypes and level up your bonds with the followers to unlock new archetypes and then create new builds or setups. It's also not just for the protagonist. Every character in your party can use all kinds of different archetypes, whether it's a mage, healer, or warrior class. All of these are available for the party to experiment with, and depending on the ones you choose, will also change the different kind of weapons that the character uses as well, adding in another layer of fun strategy and experimentation. You can even perform team attacks called synthesis, where it'll consume a certain amount of turns and MP, but using these can be very useful for higher damage or very helpful buffs. In terms of difficulty, the game certainly has its challenging parts, so I immediately got my ass kicked, especially by this late boss at the end of the demo where he basically just one-shots my whole team. Now granted, the boss was at a much higher level than me, but it definitely took me for a surprise. However, if you're familiar with games like Shin Megami Tensei and obviously Persona, then I think the game strikes a good balance of being challenging while not totally being a complete cakewalk. When it comes to the performance, the game runs very smoothly, although there were times where the game would just randomly crash as I was playing. Now keep in mind, I was playing this on the PlayStation 5, and I didn't experience any of this on the PC version. Granted, it only crashed 3 times throughout my whole 8-hour journey with the demo, and I'm pretty sure that Atlus likely have patched this up already, but I'm just sharing what I went through when I was playing. Visually, it's not exactly groundbreaker or anything, but damn, does it have a really great art direction. It pops out at you, it makes the characters and environments all look incredibly interesting, as I mentioned before. Seriously, I think Atlus pretty much perfected the art of creating striking looking UI and aesthetics that complements the game itself. As for the music, it's great stuff too, and adds this grandiose feeling of adventure in the game. The composers did a very solid job here. Overall, the prologue demo of Metaphor Refantazio left me with a pretty strong first impression. I was honestly surprised to see how packed this demo was because there was just a lot to go through and cover. Hell, there's still some things I haven't gotten a chance to mention, but I'll say that for when I do a full review of the game at some point. I absolutely look forward to seeing what the full release has to offer and to continue enjoying my journey. Now, to be honest, I don't know if I'll be able to grab this day one because I also want to cover other games like Dragon Ball Sparking Zero when that drops. Regardless though, I really enjoyed my time with this demo, and I plan on playing more of it once I get done with this video. Once again, just go on ahead and play it for yourself because I have a good feeling that this is going to be a really solid title. With all that said, this was Kazak, and I thank you guys for watching.